Aeon Flux is a sci-fi series from the 90s, loaded with action, sex, and twisted thought experiments. It's so cutting edge, it's still ahead of its time almost 30 years later. It's a cult classic beloved by many, but for a newer generation, the Aeon Flux name is overshadowed by the live-action flop from 2005. I'm Dr. M. This is my robot pal, Photon.
Hello!
Upon further inspection, we'll be looking at what makes the original animation a masterpiece, where the live-action movie went astray, and what we can expect from the MTV reboot series. Strap yourself in for Aeon Flux. In 1991, MTV debuted Liquid Television, a block of hard-edged animated shorts, including one called Aeon Flux. It's set in a dystopian future where the secret agent Aeon Flux tries to sabotage the plans of her arch-rival, the authoritarian Trevor Goodchild.
Instead of one continuous storyline, Aeon Flux was episodic. The core characters and setting are consistent, but all the other story details and side characters change regularly.
In one episode, Aeon might try to foil one of Trevor's biological experiments. In another, her only goal is to cover up some compromising photos. Sometimes Trevor and Aeon are lovers, and sometimes they're bitter enemies. More often, a mix of the two. In some episodes, Aeon dies at the end, so it even keeps you guessing about whether she'll survive. When I was a little kid, seeing the main character die like this really messed with my head.
I don't understand why she dies, though. Usually when a hero dies, it's a noble sacrifice. But sometimes Aeon's killed in a fluke accident.
Yeah, I found that aspect particularly disturbing as a kid. But Aeon Flux's twisted tone and adult themes weren't made for kids. In fact, creator Peter Chung was very deliberately trying to get away from kids stuff because he was tired of the limitations of the other series he was working on, the children's smash hit, Rugrats.
When I was developing Aeon Flux, I was actually working on Rugrats for Nickelodeon. And I found the Rugrats characters to be very limiting in what they could do. I mean, they're very squat and short, and they had short legs, and they're babies. And so I wanted to go completely the opposite direction and create characters that were very athletic and acrobatic and had long limbs. And also, at the time, I was looking at a lot of expressionist art, like Egon Schiele.
When you look at Egon Schiele's art, you can really see the influence there. Chung says he deliberately made Aeon's character, quote, visually provocative to get viewers to watch something they might not watch otherwise. Sounds good to me. Come for the TNA, stay for the experimental philosophy. If dominant women get you going, you've really got to check this series out. It's not just the ladies with lean bodies and fetish wear either. This series has something for everyone. Each episode is filled with oddball sci-fi technologies and unique aliens. It truly feels like a new world to explore, instead of just a rehash of what 10 other sci-fi series has already done before.
I don't think I have the slightest idea how this thing works.
I'm glad Peter Chung was given free rein creatively to make this. I'm kind of surprised it made it to cable TV in the first place.
The earliest episodes were just a few minutes long and had no dialogue at all. Chung says, the challenge of the filmmaker is to achieve a kind of telepathy between the viewer and the character on screen, to enable the viewer to infer thoughts and feelings through observation of physical action.
It's safe to say he nailed it. In these early silent shorts, we know exactly how these characters feel and what they're trying to accomplish without a spoken word. One powerful example is the episode War. We see Aeon Flux and other dark-haired fighters mowing down dozens of enemy soldiers. But then she and an ally are killed by one of them, and now we're following him on the blonde army's side, watching a reversal of the damage Aeon was just raining down. Next we see a brunette man take him out with a sword, then turn his attention to an incoming invasion of redheads, until we shift to the perspective of a redheaded woman who's on a mission to rescue her lover from prison. The music changes throughout the episode every time the point of view shifts to a new character, giving each army a different feel. And even in the midst of non-stop action, we feel empathy for each army as we dip into their perspective. Each soldier is doing what they must to protect the ones they love.
But then who are we hoping will win?
Everyone? No one? We see that there's good and evil on every side, and it makes the death toll even more senseless. Quite a contrast from the usual clear-cut division between good and evil we see in most movies. There's also plenty of moral gray area in the pilot episode. It begins with Aeon mowing down soldiers by the dozen. We've seen that before in plenty of movies. But then she's off screen, and we see the soldiers are human beings with their own lives. We see them suffering, grieving, and caring for their fallen comrades. We're shown the ugly aftermath of Æon's violent spree, right down to the cleaning crew who will have to mop up the blood. Imagine if stormtroopers were given as much humanity as these soldiers. It might change how we feel about the loss of life in each battle, especially knowing that some troopers like Finn are unwilling conscripts. The Rebel Alliance can still be a sympathetic force, but it's worth pointing out that it's not just the evil Empire that's killing young soldiers who are doing their best to survive. We don't get to see behind Empire masks, but if we did, we'd see frightened young faces inside. And since real war is rarely as clear-cut as dark versus light, it's probably better to portray something as serious as war more honestly. The morally ambiguous themes in Æon Flux help us to question our original assumptions about who's good in this story. Æon isn't right just because the story is told from her point of view. In an increasingly polarized political climate where all sides think they're right, I appreciated that this show has characters that mean well, but their actions still have negative consequences.
What do you mean? We know Æon's the good guy, and Trevor's the bad guy, right?
Not exactly. Æon isn't immoral, but that doesn't make her good by default. She wants to bring down Trevor's totalitarian regime, but she resorts to terrorism to do it. She turns down good money for a mission to exploit a captured alien, but in a different episode, she has no qualms about killing an entire alien race. She'll comfort and seduce a man who lost his girlfriend, without telling him that she's the reason that girlfriend is dead. Æon's the kind of person who will help a guy out with a roll of toilet paper one moment and then steal a man's crutches the next.
Okay, maybe she's a mixed bag, but Trevor is definitely evil, right?
It's more accurate to say they're opposite sides of the same selfish coin. Trevor's authoritarian state needs rebels like Æon to justify structure and control, and Æon needs something to rebel against, or she might end up living a stable, ordinary life, which horrifies her. They're both repulsed and attracted to each other. Their relationship is impossible, but there's no denying it's kinda hot when your rival is so good at what they do.
I know what you want. So is this more like it? Or is this?
Trevor is fixated on Æon and wants to have her all to himself, but loses interest when she gives in too easily. Æon pretends to be aloof and independent, but squirms with jealousy when Trevor turns his attention to other women. Just like Æon, Trevor is flexible when it comes to his moral values. He puts his citizens under constant surveillance, arguing that a society without secrets will be more just.
It's a very appropriate theme for our modern times, with increased government surveillance eroding individuals' rights to privacy.
I have nothing to hide. Only an open society can be a just society.
Most revealing. Very impressive.
But of course, Trevor is a total hypocrite. Even as he explains that lack of privacy is the great equalizer, he doesn't think those rules apply to him. He creates a secret hideaway where only he can enjoy privacy and indulge in his vices. If Trevor has a saving grace, it's that he truly seems to believe that what he's doing is best for humanity. He's not just trying to grab for power, he already has power. Just like Æon isn't struggling for freedom, she's already free. Trevor's leadership means surveillance and control, but crime is low. We see a state soldier save one of Æon's friends on the street. Trevor does lots of creepy experiments, but it's always for the sake of advancing humanity's health and well-being.
My project is not universal madness, it's universal happiness.
In an especially unnerving episode, Trevor creates a being called a custodian that can override a person's will to commit crime and make them kind and charitable instead. It has a 100% success rate to rehabilitate murderous criminals into kind and generous citizens. But is this ultimately good for society, or a monstrous corruption of free will?
It wouldn't take much for me to kill you right now.
So what's stopping you? Kill me right now.
You feel the hesitation, the doubt. You're asking yourself, is it your conscience or my custodian?
Just because I don't feel like doing something doesn't mean I'm not capable of doing it.
Both Æon and Trevor are given complex character traits that mix noble ambition with an uglier, selfish side. Even though they're both exaggerated, larger-than-life characters, Peter Chung trusts his audience to connect with them in spite of their flaws. This is a brave departure from typical sympathetic heroes we see whose sins are really somebody else's. Batman feels responsible to avenge his murdered parents. Spider-Man blames himself for Uncle Ben's death, but in neither case was he the one to pull the trigger. The real blame lies elsewhere. A hero's false guilt about their inaction isn't really as meaningful as a character who actually gets their hands dirty and feels the weight of what they've done, like Æon and Trevor do. It's far more impactful to a character's growth if they need to overcome real guilt from real sin instead of just false guilt over what someone else did. Whether you think Æon or Trevor is a villain will depend on how much you agree with their motives and actions. It's something the viewer has to wrestle with.
Clean gloves hide dirty hands, and mine are dirtier than most.
Unfortunately, all these themes that worked in Æon Flux the series were completely wasted in Æon Flux the live-action movie.
They kept a few things from the original. Kissing to pass secret messages, a lady with hands instead of feet, using shoes as hidden spice storage.
The visuals and sci-fi trappings are all there, but the characters and heart are all wrong. Instead of being independent, Æon takes orders from Meredith's stern aunt, and she's saddled with a sister character who is immediately killed just to make Æon angsty and want revenge. But it's completely unnecessary. The Æon we love in the original series is a carefree badass. She's not supposed to be moping and full of false guilt. Now we're stuck with a trope of a cool female character who is perpetually joyless and miserable. Why can't we get more ladies in the role of carefree antiheroes like Han Solo or Captain Mao? They're cool, they get things done, and they look like they're having fun doing it. More of this, less of this, please. And it just seems like lazy writing to add a revenge plot when the original character was already self-motivated and taking action. Even in the movie, she was already a secret agent going on spy missions before the sister dies, so we don't need a revenge subplot to give her a sense of purpose. It just comes across as a crutch to prop up this movie's lack of story. Æon is too obedient, too sentimental, and too unsure of herself to come anywhere close to the original character we love.
For the record, we don't blame you, Charlize.
Yeah, Charlize Theron is cool in every role she plays. It's not her acting, but the writing that ruins this character for me. The biggest disadvantage of the original series is you can never get too deep into a single storyline. The movie has the perfect chance, but nothing much happens. There's a plot twist reveal partway through, but that doesn't change what actually happens in the course of the movie. In the end, it's just a by-the-numbers rebels versus evil empire story, and the bad guys aren't even sufficiently bad. In the original series, Trevor Goodchild personifies absolute power. In the movie, Trevor is a do-nothing wimp. We learn he's done some helpful research in the past, but we don't see him do anything in the course of this movie. And when that research goes up in smoke, he hardly seems to care.
No.
Oh no, my life's work.
Freya.
My most trusted henchman. What a shame. If you don't care, why should we? All of Trevor's evil traits are conveniently displaced onto a separate character, Trevor's evil brother.
What?
And the brother's actions are further diffused by spreading responsibility across a bunch of council members.
What? Are you kidding me? The real Trevor would never let himself get bossed around by a council.
Seriously, he should have complete control over the entire nation. Trevor's narcissistic dark side was what made him a complex and interesting character. Same with Æon. It was so much more compelling when Æon took action and changed the world for her own reasons. Now that she's just motivated by dead sister revenge, she's predictable instead of impulsive. And the romance between the characters is totally forced and soulless. It's all just flashbacks to a different life Trevor and Æon don't actually remember. We're told that in a different blurry world these two loved each other. So why not show a little of that now? Where's the chemistry? Where's the passion? Why are these characters so bland and toothless?
Peter Chung called the movie a travesty and said that watching it in a crowded theater made him feel helpless, humiliated, and sad.
My condolences, Peter. I'd feel the same way if someone did this to my characters. The original animated series is like nothing you've ever seen, and it keeps you guessing. The animated version makes you think. The movie doesn't let you think. What is there to think about? What's remotely unclear? We're just experiencing a bunch of stuff that happens with no real character development or moral challenges. It's just so boring. We've seen this all before. Peter Chung speculates that either the filmmakers didn't understand the source material, or they did, but they assumed that their audience wouldn't get it. So they made changes to be more accessible to mainstream viewers. And I expect that's exactly right. Studios assume their audiences are dumb, so they give Æon and Trevor siblings to make them more sympathetic. They make it so neither Æon or Trevor are really bad, they're just misunderstood. And they're not even fully responsible for their own actions. If either character fails, the spy network or government will shoulder the blame. Even if these characters die, they can just be reborn. In the end, there's just no deeper meaning or element of risk. We keep hearing that this world is falling apart, but it seems like things are moving along just fine without anyone taking action. So there's really no stakes. The worst case scenario is that things stay as they are, and that doesn't look too bad.
But they're kidnapping people, and it makes sweet old men cry.
I know, they make a half-hearted show at something bad happening behind the scenes, but why not make it more compelling? Everything looks so cute and safe and colorful. Compare this with the original dystopian Bregna, where you might get shot in the spine for trying to escape the city, then be forced to work in a military factory assembling widgets to pay off your medical debt, only to get your legs amputated by a machine that uses that very same widget when you attempt to cross the border a second time. That's a dark system worth fighting. So either trust your audience to handle the ugliness in the characters and setting, or don't call it Æon Flux. The original series wasn't a nice, pretty place with nice, pretty people in it. And that's what I'm afraid is going to happen again now that MTV has announced a live-action TV series reboot. They're going to take the brutal world setting and bizarre characters and tone them down and pretty it up, and make sure it doesn't deviate too far from plot lines we've seen before. I predict another disaster that's going to fail for all the same reasons the live-action movie did. Once again, studios will tame the beast that we loved for its wildness. So if you're looking for a sci-fi experience unlike any other, skip the movie and give the animated series a watch. It's experimental and unconventional, the kind of show that will have you thinking about it at 2 a.m. wondering, who was right in the end? Why did this scene disturb me so much? It raises more questions than it answers. If you're a character-centric viewer who enjoys interesting psychological themes, you owe it to yourself to check this out. Thank you for watching Upon Further Inspection.
If you're not already a subscriber, make a robot happy and add us now!
If you liked this episode, please support the channel and share Mighty Mayhem with a friend. We'll see you next time! And what we can expect from the MTV reboot.
Crap! Peter Chung called the movie a tragedy, and said that watching it in a crowded movie theater made him feel helpless, homeless, and sad.